Hi, this is Synthchaser from synthchaser.com, and today I'm going to be showing you how to disassemble and remove the circuit boards from an ARP Omni 2 synthesizer. The reasons that you might want to do this is to install one of the kits, the capacitor kits or IC kits or slider kits that I sell on my website, synthchaser.com. Or two, I provide service for ARP Omni synthesizers, and you can send your boards to me and I can recap them and repair sliders, or if you've got some particular issue that needs to be fixed, we can kind of narrow it down to a board and you can send the board in and I can troubleshoot it and fix it in one of my ARP Omnis. So that being said, the reason that you might want to send the boards in separate from the rest of the keyboard is because this keyboard is very heavy and it's expensive to ship, and it's easy to get damaged in shipment. And this one I bought to fix and resell, but the key bed wasn't firmly secured in place, and as you can see, it pushed up here and damaged that top C key, which of course is different from all the rest and really difficult to find a replacement for. So yeah, the keys also overhang the keyboard, the case on the ARP synthesizers, so they're fairly easy to damage in shipping. So to pull the boards out and send them to me versus sending me the whole keyboard reduces the chance of damage to your keyboard, and it costs a lot less in shipping, particularly cross-country or internationally. So the only tool that you're going to need for this is a screwdriver with a Phillips head and a 1/4-inch socket. And we're going to get started by opening this up, and then I'm going to put the key bed back in, so it'll be like it would be if you were opening yours. So first thing to do is to take any slider caps that are left off. They're usually missing slider caps, and this one is no exception. It's missing a bunch down here. So I've removed the slider caps, and the next thing to do is to remove 4 screws, here, 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 and here. With those screws removed, now we can open the keyboard by lifting the lid like this. So let's get started removing stuff. One good thing that you can do is take a Sharpie and put a mark on each connector and the circuit board where they line up, so you can put it back together more easily. So this board we're going to remove first is the synthesizer board, and we're going to disconnect this cable between the synthesizer board and the baseboard down here. We're going to disconnect this cable here between the synthesizer board and the phaser. There are 6 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which we're going to remove. Now with those screws removed, pull the board back and remove this ribbon cable between the synthesizer board and the synthesizer control board. Now we have the synthesizer board out and we can set it aside. The next board that I'm going to remove is the synthesizer control board, which is this board here. And to remove this board, we're going to remove 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws, and we are going to disconnect this connector here. Before we do that, and there's another connector here which we'll remove once we unscrew the board. So with those screws removed, gently take the board out like this and disconnect this ribbon cable. Now you can set the board down here, and we'll come back to this later when we take the baseboard out. The next board that I'm going to remove is the phaser, which is this board here. It's mounted on top of another board with some standoffs, and I'm going to remove 4 screws, here, 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 and here. And now with that board unscrewed, we can lift off and remove the phaser. And I can see a nice charred area here by this replaced tantalum capacitor. So there's been a short circuit here at some point. There's a burn mark on both sides of the board there. So the next board that we're going to remove is the string control board, which is this board here. So to remove this board, we're going to disconnect this gray cable that we can get to now because we removed the phaser. And I'm going to put a mark showing the orientation and disconnect this connector here. And I'll feed it through, and there are 3 screws here, here, and here which need to be removed. There is an insulator typically on this screw. Be sure to save that and put it back in this position when you're reinstalling it. Otherwise, the screw may short to this solder pad there. So with those screws removed, the board comes out and you can set it aside. The next board that we're going to remove is the upper voicing board, which is this board here. To remove this board, we're going to disconnect this cable here. So like the other boards, I'm going to mark the orientation, pin 1, and we'll disconnect this connector. And then there's 5 ribbon cables, 2 to the keyboard here, and 3 to the lower voicing board here, which we'll disconnect. Then there's 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, which we'll remove to get the board out. So with the screws removed, we're able to remove the upper voicing board. And we'll set it aside. The next board that we're going to remove is the lower voicing board. There's a few cables that we need to mark the orientation of. There's this power cable to the baseboard here, which we'll mark. There's this orange and black cable which goes to some jacks, which we'll mark. There is this cable here which goes to the baseboard, which we're going to mark. And the power cable from the power supply here, which we'll mark. And then we'll disconnect. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's also 2 ribbon cables coming from the keyboard. With those removed, then we can unscrew it. There's 6 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And with those screws removed, we're able to remove the lower voicing board. So now we're going to turn the keyboard around to the back, and we're going to remove this baseboard. And there is one tool that we do need that I neglected to mention. And I'm going to close this up so you can see and make sure that I'm in range here. All right. So there is one tool that I forgot to mention that you need, and that's a 1/2-inch socket to remove these nuts around these 7 jacks. So the baseboard is being held in by 2 things. One are these 2 screws here, which we'll remove with the 1/4-inch socket. And then the other thing is the 7 jacks that I just pointed out. So we're going to remove the nuts and washers with the 1/2-inch socket. And with that done, we'll turn the keyboard back around and open it up again. So with that done, there's one more connector here, down here. Let me make sure you can see it. there's a connector here which will mark the orientation of and disconnect. And then we can remove the baseboard. And when we take the baseboard up, there's the ribbon cable to the synthesizer control board, which we can disconnect. There's some little washers on the inside, which will either fall off inside or you'll need to take off. And you can set the baseboard aside. So we have the baseboard now. And by doing that, we also freed up the synthesizer control board. And we'll set that aside. The only thing left in the keyboard now that we're going to remove is the power supply. And before we remove the power supply, we are going to disconnect the wires from the switch and the IEC inlet. So typically there are 2 black wires here on this first location, which we'll disconnect. There's the hot and the switch, which is here. And then there's the hot after the switch here. So we disconnected those 3. Do not touch these unless the keyboard is unplugged, because these are live wires, and absolutely do not touch there with the keyboard plugged in. So now that we've got that unplugged, there are 6 screws to remove. 4 are underneath the transformer, and 2 are connecting this heatsink to the case. We're going to have to grab onto these with a pliers to keep the nut from spinning. But one thing that you can do to make this easier is to set the case up on its side. So I'm going to do that, and I'll put the camera in a tripod, and then we'll unscrew this power supply. So I've stood the keyboard up on its side, and I'm going to be removing 4 screws. These are the 4 that go underneath the transformer, and these are the 2 that go to the heatsink. And I'm going to swing around the other side, and with one hand I'm going to hold this transformer so it doesn't drop, the power supply board doesn't drop down when I unscrew it. But first I'm going to remove the 2 screws down here. So here I'm going to grip the nut, and I'm going to remove the screw. Now I'm going to remove the 4 for the transformer. Remove the power supply. And with that, we've got all the boards out. We have the phaser board, the synthesizer board, the bass board, synthesizer control board, string control board, lower voicing board, upper voicing board, and power supply. All of these boards have tantalum capacitors on them, and all these boards need to be serviced in a restoration of an ARP Omni 2. So hopefully that showed you how to disassemble your ARP Omni. Reassembly is exactly the same, just in reverse order. And if you have questions about your ARP Omni 2 or your ARP Omni 2 needs service, please post a message in the comments, or comment on the video, or send me a message through my website, synthchaser.com. This is Synthchaser. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.